I didn't hear the conversation. Or at least, I didn't notice it until it was too late. The music, the laughter, the chatter, it all blurred into a dull hum around me as I stood there, sipping my drink, my gaze fixed on nothing in particular. Everything felt off. Not wrong, per se, but strange, like the pieces of a puzzle I thought I had long finished were suddenly scattered again, and I had no idea how they got that way. Maybe it was the way her back arched slightly when she laughed, or the way she kept glancing at her phone every few minutes, tapping away in a conversation I couldn't see. Maybe it was the way the sound of her voice had changed, becoming almost robotic, like she was performing for someone else, not me. But whatever it was, I couldn't ignore it. Something was slipping away, and I couldn't grasp it in time. I didn't even expect her to kiss me that night, much less say the words she did. We were at her best friend Layla's house. Big, over the top, as usual. Layla had a thing for extravagant parties, a talent, really, for making every little gathering feel like an event. But this one felt different. Not the party itself, but something about the way Claire was behaving. She was floating around the room, speaking in bursts, but never really present. It wasn't like her. Usually, when we went out, we were a team. But tonight, she was distant. Almost as if she were a ghost at her own party. I kept telling myself it was nothing. But my gut? It was screaming that something was wrong. My mind tried to bury it beneath the noise of the evening, but it didn't go away. The music was blaring, people were dancing, and suddenly, I found myself standing next to Claire, trying to make some sort of contact, trying to pull her back from wherever she had gone. I reached out for her hand. She gave it to me, but it felt disconnected. Cold, almost. I gently pulled her toward the dance floor. No words, just the soft, familiar rhythm between us as we moved. For a few moments, it was just the two of us. But even in the stillness of that dance, I could feel it. A crack. Not something that happened just tonight, but something that had been silently creeping in for weeks. Something unspoken. Something I should have noticed, but hadn't. She leaned her head against my chest for a brief moment, and I thought I'd finally caught her attention. Maybe this was the moment things would feel right again. But when I looked down at her, her eyes weren't closed in that peaceful way I remembered. Instead, they were focused on something across the room. I wanted to ask her what was wrong. I wanted to reach into her mind and pull her back. But I didn't. I thought maybe if I just held on long enough, the silence would speak. I thought if I danced long enough, she'd come back to me. But then she spoke, and I wasn't prepared for it. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, barely audible. But it was enough to pierce through the music. My heart stopped. I didn't know what she meant. My hand froze on her waist. The words didn't make sense, but they cut through the rhythm, louder than anything else. The world felt like it froze for a brief moment. I opened my mouth to speak, but she shook her head, gently stepping away from me, her fingers slipping from mine. "I think we need to talk later," she said, more plainly this time, her voice calm but firm. But when she looked up at me, there was something behind her eyes that I couldn't read. Regret? Fear? Disappointment? And with that, she walked away. I didn't follow her. I didn't know what to say. In fact, I didn't know what I was feeling anymore. I thought I knew my wife, knew her better than anyone. But suddenly, it felt like she was a stranger, a person I couldn't recognize. I stood there in the middle of the room, surrounded by people who were oblivious to whatever had just happened. They were laughing, chatting, enjoying their drinks. And I was frozen, caught in this weird space between knowing something was wrong and not being able to do a thing about it. It was as if I had crossed some invisible line, and I had no idea how to go back. Maybe I should have confronted her right then. Maybe I should have forced her to tell me what was happening. But the silence between us was too heavy. I could feel it. There was no use in pretending everything was okay. So I waited, and I watched her as she slipped into another conversation across the room, her body language a far cry from the woman I had married. And in that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just stepped into something far darker than I had imagined. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at Claire as she mingled with the group across the room. The music played on, the chatter swirled around me, but everything felt muted, like I was underwater. I wanted to move, to approach her, but my legs felt frozen in place. The words she whispered to me, "I can't do this anymore," replayed over and over in my mind, each repetition digging deeper into the pit of my stomach. What had happened? Where had it gone wrong? The worst part was, I didn't know when it had started. I kept trying to trace back the moments. Was it something I had said? something I hadn't noticed. But nothing stood out. Our life had been comfortable, steady, even happy. We had our usual routine. But now, standing in the middle of this bustling party, I couldn't shake the feeling that Claire and I were no longer in sync. We were like two different people drifting further apart, and I couldn't figure out why. I tried to shake off the unease. This wasn't the time or place to confront her. I'd give her some space. She needed it. But that decision only brought more questions. The more I thought about it, the more the weight of her words settled in. What had she meant? I can't do this anymore. Was she talking about us? Was this the end? I needed clarity, and the only way I could get that was by confronting her. I wasn't the type of person to let things fester. I wasn't the type to stay in the dark, letting my mind spiral with uncertainties. I had to know what was going on. I told myself I would wait. A few minutes. A little time to process. But my mind wasn't having any of it. I pushed through the crowd, making my way toward the kitchen. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I knew I couldn't just let it go. When I reached the kitchen, I found Claire leaning against the counter, speaking to a group of friends. She looked so detached. The conversation was light, nothing important, but the distance between us was impossible to ignore. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach her, but she caught my eye. A flicker of recognition passed through her face before she looked away again. My heart sank. Something was definitely off. I cleared my throat, gathering the courage to speak. "Claire," I said, my voice barely audible over the noise of the party, but loud enough for her to hear. She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "Can we talk?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She glanced over her shoulder, then back at me, and then she did something I wasn't expecting. She smiled. It wasn't the warm smile I was used to, the kind that would make everything feel right. This one was forced, stiff, almost as if she was pretending. It made my stomach turn. I couldn't understand it. Why was she acting like this? What happened to the woman I knew? "Not here, Gavin," she said, her voice cool and almost flat. She stepped away from the group and made her way to the back door. I followed her, my heart pounding harder with each step. The evening's light-hearted mood was a distant memory now, replaced by something heavier. Something I wasn't prepared for. Outside, the night air hit me like a slap in the face. It was cold, and the tension between us was palpable. Claire leaned against the fence, her arms crossed, her face turned away from me. I stood a few feet away, unsure of what to say next. I wanted answers, but I didn't know how to ask. "Claire, what's going on?" I asked, my voice softer now, though the frustration was still there. "What did you mean by what you said earlier?" She sighed, a long, drawn-out breath. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded distant, almost as though she were talking to herself rather than to me. "I don't know, Gavin," she said, her words quiet. I don't know anymore. I feel like we're stuck, like we're just going through the motions." The words hit me harder than I anticipated. Stuck? Just going through the motions? Was she serious? I thought things were fine. Or at least, I wanted to believe they were. "Claire, we've always talked about things. We've always worked through stuff," I said, stepping closer, trying to make her see that this wasn't just some passing feeling. "What happened? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" She didn't look at me. She kept her gaze on the ground, her arms tighter around herself. "I don't know if you'd understand," she said, almost in a whisper. "I've been feeling like this for a while, but I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to say it out loud, because I know how much you'll try to fix it. But maybe I'm beyond fixing, Gavin. Maybe I'm not the person I was when we first met." Her words were like a punch to the gut. Beyond fixing? What did she mean? Was this it? Was this really the end? I reached out to touch her arm, but she flinched slightly, pulling away from me. The gesture stung more than I cared to admit. "Claire, please," I pleaded, my voice breaking a little. "You can't just throw away everything we've built. We've been through so much together. I love you. I need you to tell me what's wrong." She shook her head slowly, her eyes brimming with something I couldn't quite identify. Regret? Sadness? Maybe even guilt? I couldn't tell. But there was something in her expression that told me this wasn't just a phase. This was bigger than that. "I don't know if I'm the person you think I am anymore," she whispered, barely audible. Then she straightened up, wiped her eyes, and turned toward the door again. I stood there, frozen, my thoughts a whirlwind. The woman I had known, the woman I had loved, was slipping away right before my eyes. But I still didn't know why. What had changed? What had happened to us? The night stretched on, but every minute felt like an eternity. The party's noise, the laughter, the music, it all seemed to fade into the background, consumed by the heaviness between Claire and me. She was inside, mingling with the crowd again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman I'd known for years was somehow slipping through my fingers. She had said so little, but it felt like she had already said everything. The words, "I don't know if I'm the person you think I am anymore," echoed in my mind, each repetition cutting deeper than the last. I found myself pacing in the backyard, the cold air biting at my skin, but I barely felt it. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what had happened. What had changed? Why was she so distant? And why didn't she want to fight for us? I'd always been the kind of guy to overthink everything, but tonight, the overthinking wasn't enough. There was no logic that could explain the way Claire had suddenly pulled away. We had built something together, something that, up until now, had felt rock solid. So why was she acting like this? Why was everything so broken? My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from Claire, but it didn't help clear the fog. If anything, it only made things more confusing. "We need to talk. Later." It was so simple, so detached. What did she mean by later? Was this her way of avoiding the confrontation we desperately needed? I looked at the message, rereading it several times, hoping for some hidden meaning, some clue that would explain her behavior. But there was nothing, just the cold emptiness of the words. I stared out into the darkness of the backyard, feeling more isolated than I had ever felt in my life. How had we gone from laughter and love to this? To silence and secrets? I had never been good at reading between the lines, but Claire's behavior was undeniable. She was withdrawing, shutting me out, and I had no idea why. I walked back inside, trying to gather my thoughts. The house was loud, but I barely registered the noise as I scanned the crowd, looking for Claire. When I found her, she was at the bar, chatting with some guy I didn't recognize. He was leaning in a little too close, laughing at something she said. It was small, but it was enough to set off a chain reaction in my brain. It wasn't the way they were talking, but the way she responded. She was laughing, genuinely laughing, but it wasn't the laugh I knew. It was the kind of laugh she used when she was pretending to be happy. She wasn't smiling with her eyes. She wasn't present. I tried to ignore the jealousy bubbling up inside me. I couldn't let myself spiral into paranoia. But how could I not? Every fiber of my being was telling me something was wrong. It wasn't just that she was talking to someone else. It was the way she was doing it. It was as if she was putting on a show, something for the benefit of the people around her. I couldn't help but wonder, was she playing a part? Was this some performance for everyone except me? I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching her interact with him. There was a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach, a tightness in my chest. I wanted to walk up to her, to confront her, to demand some answers. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. I was afraid of what she might say. Afraid that the truth would be something I didn't want to hear. Eventually, Claire looked up and caught my eye. For a moment, I saw a flash of something, guilt maybe, or was it regret? She quickly excused herself from the conversation and made her way over to me, her steps quick, but the distance between us felt like miles. "Gavin," she said softly, her voice almost too calm, too controlled. "We need to talk. But not here. Not now." I felt my blood run cold. Her words hit me like a brick. Not here, not now. What did that even mean? Was she trying to avoid me? Was she trying to delay whatever conversation was coming? I opened my mouth to respond, but she beat me to it. I don't want to make a scene. Can we go somewhere else?" She was avoiding my gaze, her hands twisting together in a way I hadn't seen before. I nodded, but the knot in my stomach tightened. I didn't want to go somewhere else. I didn't want to wait. I wanted answers now. But I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't something we could settle in the middle of a crowded party. It wasn't something we could fix with a few words and a hug. There was something bigger here, something I wasn't prepared for. Without a word, I turned and led her outside. The night air hit me like a wave, sharp and biting. The silence between us was suffocating. Neither of us spoke as we walked down the street, away from the party, away from the noise and the confusion. I could feel the tension between us like a weight, pressing down with every step. When we reached a small park down the road, Claire stopped. She turned to face me, but this time, she didn't look like the woman I had married. She looked like a stranger, someone I had never seen before. "Gavin," she started, but her voice faltered. "I don't know how to say this, but I can't keep pretending. I can't keep pretending that everything's okay. My heart sank. This was it. This was the moment I had been dreading. But I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to ask the questions I needed to ask. My mind was racing with possibilities, but none of them made sense. What was she talking about? What was she about to tell me? Claire, I said, my voice tight. Please, just tell me. What's going on? What's really happening here? Her eyes welled up with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. She took a deep breath and then, with a voice that sounded so much like someone else's, she spoke the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I don't love you anymore, Gavin. The words she spoke hit me harder than I could have ever prepared for. I don't love you anymore, Gavin. It was as if the ground beneath me gave way, and I was free falling into an abyss, a place where nothing made sense anymore. I could hear the words in my head, over and over again, but they didn't seem real. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. This wasn't how I imagined us ending. My breath caught in my throat, and for a split second, everything went silent. It was like the world had frozen around me, and the only thing I could focus on was the hollow ache growing in my chest. I blinked, trying to process her words. My mind scrambled to find something, anything, that would make sense of this, but I came up empty. This wasn't a fight. This wasn't a misunderstanding. She wasn't upset over something trivial. This was it. She had made up her mind. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone else, was standing in front of me, telling me that she no longer loved me. The weight of it was crushing. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I was stuck in a place I couldn't escape from. Claire's eyes were clouded with sadness, but also something else, a kind of relief. It was like she had been carrying this burden for so long, and now that it was out in the open, she felt lighter. It was so hard to watch, because in that moment, I could see it. The distance between us had become too great. There was nothing left to hold on to. And the worst part was, I didn't even know when it had started. I had been blind to it. I had been so focused on everything around me, trying to keep up with work, with our life together, with her ambitions, that I missed it. I missed all the signs. The little moments when she was distant, the times she'd gotten quiet, the times when she'd seemed so far away, like she was living in a different world. I thought it was just a phase. I thought it was stress, or maybe just exhaustion. But no, it was something deeper, something that had been brewing under the surface for a long time. For what felt like an eternity, I didn't know what to say. My mind raced, but I couldn't form the words. How do you argue with something like that? How do you fix a broken love that you didn't even realize was cracking? My chest tightened, and I could feel my pulse in my throat. Finally, I forced myself to speak. Why didn't you say something before? Why didn't you tell me? All this time, you were just letting it build up inside you? My voice cracked, but I couldn't stop it. I wanted to understand. I needed to understand. Claire wiped her eyes, her hands trembling slightly. I didn't know how, she said softly, her voice laced with pain. I didn't want to hurt you, Gavin. I never wanted to hurt you. But I was dying inside, pretending like everything was okay when it wasn't. It was like I was watching a life I didn't want, and I didn't know how to get out of it. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I thought I could change. I thought I could find a way back to the person I used to be, the person I was when we first met. But somewhere along the way, I lost her. And now, I don't know who I am anymore. The more she spoke, the more I felt like I was being suffocated by the weight of her words. It wasn't just the loss of love that hurt. It was the realization that she had been suffering in silence for so long, and I had no idea. I had no idea she felt this way. I had no idea that everything we had built was crumbling, right under my nose. I wanted to reach out to her, to touch her, to somehow make her feel better, but I couldn't. The space between us felt too wide, too vast. Even though we were standing there, in the same place, I felt like we were on opposite sides of a chasm. I wanted to beg her to stay, to ask her to give us another chance, but I knew it wouldn't help. She had made up her mind. You could have talked to me, I said, my voice raw with emotion. You could have told me something. I would have done anything to make it work, Claire. Anything. She shook her head, her eyes closing briefly as if to block out the pain. I tried, Gavin. I tried in my own way. But every time I looked at you, I felt like I was lying. Like I was pretending, and I couldn't keep doing it. I couldn't keep living in a lie. I could hear the finality in her voice. There was no going back from this. I had lost her. And the worst part was, I didn't know how or why. She was still the same person in many ways, the woman I had married, the woman I had built my life with. But something had shifted. Something had changed deep inside her, and I had missed it. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling now. "I never meant for it to be like this. I never wanted to hurt you. But I can't keep pretending. I can't keep holding on to something that isn't real." I stood there, frozen, unable to move. The woman I loved, who I thought was my partner, my best friend, was standing there, telling me that she had outgrown me, that she had outgrown us. It felt like a betrayal, a quiet, slow betrayal that had been happening for months, maybe longer, and I hadn't even noticed. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. What was there to say? What could I possibly say to make her change her mind? To make her realize that I still loved her, that I still wanted to fix things? But I couldn't fix it, and she knew it. She had already made up her mind. In that moment, I felt something inside me snap. Something that had been holding me together, something that had kept me sane, shattered into a million pieces. Because as much as I didn't want to admit it, I knew she was right. I had lost her, and I had no idea how to get her back. The next few minutes felt like a blur, like time had been stretched out to an unbearable degree. I stood there, in the middle of that dark park, my mind still grappling with Claire's words. "I don't love you anymore." I couldn't get them out of my head. It was as if her voice was echoing in my mind, louder and louder, drowning out everything else. I wanted to scream, to shout, to demand that she take it back, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't know how to fight for something that felt like it was already slipping away. Claire was still standing there, her shoulders hunched, her eyes fixed on the ground. The distance between us was so wide now, so vast, that I wasn't sure we'd ever find a way back to each other. I could see the tears brimming in her eyes, but they didn't fall. Instead, she wiped them away quickly, like she was trying to erase the emotions she couldn't control. I wanted to comfort her, to pull her close and make her feel safe again, but I didn't know how. It felt like any attempt to reach out would be met with rejection. It was like we were both trapped in a moment of our own making. Two people who once knew each other so well, now standing at the precipice of something we couldn't understand. I was shaking, not just with anger, but with confusion, with fear. I had never felt this lost before. I had always prided myself on being able to figure things out, on being able to solve problems, but this was different. This wasn't something I could fix. This wasn't something I could control. "What happened, Claire?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, the words escaping my lips before I could stop them. "How did we get here? How did we go from being happy to this?" She didn't answer at first. She just stood there, staring at the ground, her hands trembling at her sides. I wanted her to look at me, to give me something, anything that could explain this, but she wouldn't. She seemed so far away, like she had already checked out mentally, emotionally. She wasn't here with me anymore. She had already left, even if she was still standing right in front of me. "I don't know, Gavin," she finally said, her voice soft and broken. "I wish I had an answer for you, but I don't. It's just been building up, you know? And now it's too much. I can't ignore it anymore. I can't keep pretending that we're okay when I'm not even sure who I am anymore. I've tried, I really have, but I don't know if I can keep going like this." I felt like the world was crashing down around me. I couldn't understand what she was saying. "You don't even know who you are anymore?" I echoed, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "But I thought we were building something together. I thought we were in this together. I thought I was part of who you were." She looked at me then, her eyes filled with something that looked like regret, but also something else, something deeper. "You are, Gavin. You are part of who I was. But not anymore. Not in the way you think. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to make you understand. But I need to be honest with you. I need to stop pretending. I can't keep lying to both of us." The words stung, more than I ever thought possible. She was telling me, in the most painful way, that I wasn't enough anymore. That everything we had built, everything we had fought for, was meaningless in her eyes. And it wasn't because of something I had done, or at least, I didn't think it was. It wasn't a betrayal, a cheating scandal, or a huge fight that had driven us apart. It was just something that had faded away over time, like the slow burn of a fire that eventually dies out without anyone noticing. I took a step forward, trying to close the distance between us, trying to make her see how much I still cared. But Claire took a step back, her expression growing harder, more distant. "I don't want to hurt you, Gavin. she said, her voice low. I never wanted to hurt you. But I can't stay in this. I can't keep pretending I feel something I don't. You deserve someone who loves you the way you love them. And right now, I'm not that person. I couldn't speak. The air felt thick, like it was suffocating me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The woman I had shared my life with, my hopes, my dreams, was telling me she didn't love me anymore. I wanted to shake her, to make her see what we were throwing away. But all I could do was stand there, paralyzed by the weight of it. I don't know what to do, I said, my voice cracking. I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix it, Gavin, Claire replied, her words sharp but still tinged with sadness. It's not about fixing it. It's about letting go. Sometimes, things just end. And that's what this is. It's the end of something we both try to hold on to, but it's not working anymore. And I don't know how to make you understand that. I wanted to argue. I wanted to fight back, to make her see that I wasn't ready to give up on us, that I wasn't ready to just let go of everything we had built. But the truth was, deep down, I knew she was right. She had already let go. She had already made her decision. And no amount of pleading, no amount of begging, was going to change it. I stood there, in the cold night air, feeling like a stranger in my own life. The person I thought I knew so well, the person I had built everything with, was slipping away, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't hold on to her anymore. And as Claire turned to walk away, I realized, with a sickening certainty, that this was it. This was the end, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The sound of her footsteps echoing in the night air felt like a finality I wasn't ready to accept. Claire wasn't just walking away from me. She was walking away from everything we had been. The woman I thought I knew was slowly slipping through my fingers, and I was powerless to stop it. There was no fight left in me. I had tried. I had desperately tried to understand what went wrong, to fix it, to do anything that might bring us back to the place we used to be. But now, standing in that cold, empty park, I realized that I had lost her. And nothing I said or did could change that. I stood there for what felt like hours, watching her walk away, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. My feet were frozen in place, my body aching with the weight of everything I had just learned. There was no running after her. There was no point in trying to make her stay when she had already decided. The truth hit me with the force of a wrecking ball. The love we once shared was gone, and there was no getting it back. I wanted to scream, to shout at the injustice of it all. How could this happen? How could I not see it coming? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Claire had been slipping away for months. Little signs I hadn't noticed, little changes in her behavior, the way she would withdraw after a long day or lose interest in things we used to enjoy together. And I, too consumed by my own routine, had ignored them. I hadn't been paying attention, hadn't been present in the way I should have been. It was like we were both living parallel lives, orbiting each other, but never truly connecting. I finally moved, my legs aching as I took one slow, reluctant step after another. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything. I knew what she had said, I knew what she felt, but I couldn't wrap my head around it. How did love just disappear like that? How did something that had once felt so solid, so real, become nothing more than a hollow shell? I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed her number, my hands trembling as I held it to my ear. The ring seemed to stretch on forever, each second dragging me deeper into a pit I didn't know how to climb out of. Finally, the voicemail picked up. Hey, this is Claire. I'm not available right now. Leave a message after the beep. I swallowed hard, my throat tight with unshed tears. I couldn't leave a message. What would I even say? That I wasn't ready for this? That I couldn't accept what she was telling me? No, it wouldn't change anything. She had already made her choice, and there was no going back. I hung up without leaving a message and sat down on a bench near the park's edge, the cold creeping through my jacket. I stared at the ground, feeling the weight of everything settle on me. For the first time in my life, I had no idea who I was anymore. My identity had been so intertwined with Claire, with our life together, that without her, I was adrift. Who was I without her? What was I supposed to do now? The breeze ruffled the leaves around me, but I barely noticed it. I had to let go of her, I knew that. I had to accept that she didn't love me anymore, that we were over. But it wasn't that simple. There was still a part of me that refused to let go, that clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, she would change her mind. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. Hours seemed to pass before I finally stood up and made my way back to the party. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to face anyone, to pretend like everything was okay. But I had nowhere else to go. The house was still bustling with noise, laughter, and chatter, but it all felt so distant. I was on the outside now, looking in. No one seemed to notice the storm raging inside me. I wasn't even sure if I cared anymore. I walked straight to the bar, pouring myself a drink, trying to drown the emptiness that had settled in my chest. I felt disconnected, like I was walking through someone else's life, watching myself make decisions that didn't feel like mine. The glass in my hand trembled, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't the alcohol that was making me feel this way. It was the reality of what had just happened. I was staring into my glass, lost in thought, when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find Layla, Claire's best friend, standing behind me, a concerned look on her face. "Gavin, are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft but laced with worry. I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to tell her everything, to scream about what had just happened, but the words wouldn't come. "Yeah," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'm fine." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. Layla was always good at reading people, but I could tell she knew better than to ask more. Instead, she just nodded and offered a faint smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm here if you need to talk," she said quietly before walking away. The words hung in the air as I stood there, alone once again. I wanted to believe that I could get through this, that I could find a way to fix myself, to move on. But it felt like everything I had built, everything I had worked for, was falling apart around me. Claire was gone, and I didn't know who I was without her. I could feel the weight of the past few hours pressing down on me. I had never felt so empty, so lost. The party around me seemed like a distant dream, a life that was no longer mine. I thought back to the times when Claire and I used to laugh together, when things were simpler, when I thought I knew who we were. But now, all of that seemed like a lie. I took another drink, trying to push down the tightness in my chest, but it didn't help. Nothing would. This was it. The slow, painful end of everything I thought I knew. The rest of the night dragged on in a haze of half smiles and empty conversations. People came and went, laughing, talking, but I couldn't join in. I was stuck in my own head, drowning in thoughts I couldn't escape. Every time I tried to distract myself, every time I reached for another drink or forced myself to engage in small talk, Claire's face would appear in my mind. Her eyes, distant and cold, her words echoing in my ears. "I don't love you anymore." I couldn't stop hearing it. I couldn't stop feeling the weight of it. At some point, I realized I was no longer part of the party. I had become a spectator, watching life unfold around me like I was on the outside looking in. Everyone was going about their business, but I was stuck, trapped in a moment that seemed to stretch on forever, with no way to escape. I walked outside again, the cool night air doing little to numb the emptiness inside me. I needed space. I needed time to think, but mostly, I needed to breathe. The pressure in my chest was unbearable, and I could feel my body aching from the weight of everything I had just learned. I leaned against a tree, staring out into the darkness, trying to make sense of what had happened. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind? I kept asking myself the same questions, but no matter how many times I repeated them, the answers didn't come. The reality of Claire's words still hadn't fully settled in. It was like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life with, was now a stranger. She had slipped away, and I hadn't even seen it happening. I had taken her presence for granted, thinking everything was fine, while she had been quietly falling out of love with me. The sting of rejection burned deep, but it wasn't just the loss of Claire that hurt. It was the realization that I had failed. I had failed to see the signs, failed to be there for her in the way she needed. We had drifted apart, and I had been so caught up in my own world that I hadn't even noticed. Now it was too late. I felt like I was suffocating, like the air around me had thickened, and I couldn't get a full breath. I needed to leave the party. I needed to get away from this place, from all the people who were still laughing and having fun while I was falling apart. But when I turned to leave, I saw her again. Claire was standing at the door, watching me from inside. She looked at me for a moment, and then, without a word, she stepped outside. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to turn and run, to avoid whatever conversation was about to unfold. But another part of me knew this was inevitable. This was the moment I had been dreading, the moment that would define everything that came after. Claire walked toward me, her steps slow, deliberate. She was still wearing that distant look, the one I had seen earlier, and it made my heart ache even more. She stopped a few feet away from me, her eyes scanning my face for a moment before she spoke. "I didn't want this to happen," she said softly, her voice fragile, like the words were costing her something. "I didn't want to hurt you, Gavin, but I don't know what else to say." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to shout, to demand that she explain everything, to make her see how much I still cared. But I couldn't find the words. My throat felt tight, like I was choking on everything I wanted to say. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I managed to ask, my voice barely audible. "Why wait until now? Why let me go on thinking everything was okay?" "I didn't know how," she replied, her voice trembling. "I thought I could change. I thought I could feel the way I used to, but it wasn't happening. And the longer I kept pretending, the worse it got. I couldn't keep living a lie, Gavin. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't." I wanted to reach out to her, to make her understand that I didn't care if things weren't perfect. I just wanted her. But it wasn't that simple anymore. She had already made her decision. She had already checked out, even if she was standing in front of me now, her face filled with sadness and regret. There was no going back. "I just don't understand," I said, my voice breaking. "How did we get here? How did we go from everything to nothing? I thought we were fine. I thought we were happy." Claire looked away, her eyes clouding over with emotion. "We weren't happy, Gavin. Not like you think. I've been holding on, trying to keep everything together, but I can't do it anymore. I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not. I thought I could fix it, but I can't fix this." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to argue with her when she was telling the truth, at least from her perspective. She wasn't the same person she used to be, and I wasn't either. We had both changed, but in different ways, and we hadn't noticed until it was too late. I stood there in silence, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. But none of them made sense. Nothing could fix what was broken. For the first time in a long time, I realized something. I didn't know who I was anymore without her. We had built a life together, but now I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at the abyss, with no way to climb back up. I had tried to hold on, but the harder I tried, the more I realized that there was nothing left to hold on to. Claire took a step back, her face softening. "I'm sorry, Gavin," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I wish I could fix this. I really do, but I can't." And with that, she turned and walked away. I stood there, frozen, watching her go. Each step she took felt like a knife to my heart, and as she disappeared into the night, I knew that was the last time I would see her as the woman I once knew. She was gone, and with her, so was the life I thought I had. The night dragged on after Claire left, and I found myself standing in the dark, feeling more alone than I ever had before. I had expected this to be the end of everything. My marriage, my future, the life I thought I knew. It felt like I was standing at the bottom of a deep hole, looking up at the world I once knew, knowing that I would never be able to climb back to where I was. But as the night wore on and the cold air wrapped around me, I began to feel something shift inside me. I didn't know how to explain it, but the weight of Claire's departure, the devastation, started to feel lighter. Maybe it was because, in that moment, I realized something that had been buried beneath all the pain. I still had the ability to choose. I still had the ability to rebuild. As the party died down and the guests slowly trickled out, I stood there, still processing everything that had happened. But for the first time in hours, I didn't feel consumed by the darkness. I didn't feel like I was falling anymore. I was still standing, still breathing, and that, in itself, felt like a victory. I left the park and headed home. The apartment was empty, and the silence was deafening, but there was a strange sense of peace there, too. I didn't know what was next for me, but I knew that the pain wouldn't last forever. The hurt, the confusion, all the unanswered questions, they would fade. Slowly, over time, they would be replaced by something else. The days that followed weren't easy. There were moments when I wanted to reach out to Claire, to try and fix things, to somehow make sense of what had happened. But I resisted. I knew I needed to move forward, even if that meant leaving the past behind. It was time for me to heal, to find my own path, separate from the life I had once shared with her. Over time, I started to rediscover things I had long forgotten: passions, hobbies, friends. I found myself waking up with a renewed sense of purpose, even though it felt strange at first. I was alone, yes, but not in the way I had thought. I wasn't defined by the relationship that had ended. I was still Gavin. And that realization, that I was still me, was the first step toward healing. Months later, I found myself sitting in a coffee shop, talking with a woman I had met at a mutual friends gathering. Her name was Emily, and she had a way of laughing that made everything around her feel brighter. We didn't talk about relationships, not at first. We didn't talk about the past, but I could feel the connection growing, and I found myself thinking that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than the hurt I had endured. It wasn't that I had forgotten about Claire. I had loved her deeply, and part of me always would. But I had learned something invaluable through the pain. I had learned that life doesn't stop when something ends. It keeps moving forward, whether we want it to or not. The best thing we can do is move with it, to embrace the changes, to grow from them. One afternoon, I received a message from Claire. I had braced myself for it for months, knowing that it would come at some point. When I opened it, I saw that she was simply checking in. She apologized again for everything, but her words didn't sting the way they once had. "I hope you're doing okay," the message read. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I just want you to know that I never meant to hurt you. You were always a great person. I hope you find happiness." It wasn't a plea for reconciliation. It wasn't an apology for her decision. It was just a note, a small sign that we were both moving on, that we had both grown from the experience. I didn't respond right away, but I sat there, feeling something new, gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons I had learned, for the pain that had eventually led to growth, and for the strength I had discovered within myself. And then I smiled. Not because I had everything figured out, but because I knew that the future wasn't defined by one person, one moment, or one relationship. It was defined by the choices we make each day, the way we pick ourselves up after falling, and the way we choose to move forward. So, I moved forward. And it felt good. It felt right. I didn't know what was next. Maybe it would be Emily, or maybe it would be something else entirely. But for the first time in a long time, I knew that whatever happened, I would be okay. I was going to be okay. And that, in the end, was all that mattered.